They left me a note stuck to the refrigerator door. 15 years later, I left them a contract they were desperate to sign, but could not. I was not taking back my childhood. I was just taking exactly what they coveted most. On the brightly lit bidding stage, I saw two familiar faces. They called me their child. I called them the competition. My name is Noelle Archer. I am 28 years old, and I run Tide Point Constructors. My office is a box of glass and steel on the 34th floor, cantilevered out over the gray, moody expanse of Glass Bay, Oregon. The view is demanding. It does not tolerate small thoughts or short-term plans. On clear days, I can see the white plumes of the breakers crashing against the distant jetty. On days like today, the fog presses in, a soft, suffocating wall that blurs the line between the water and the sky, leaving me suspended in the clouds. It is quiet up here, the sounds of the shipyard far below, the gulls, the traffic on the bridge, they are all muted, bled away by the altitude and the acoustic dampening. All that remains is the low, steady hum of the building's climate control and the rush of my own blood. My assistant, Jude, entered without knocking, a privilege he earned through years of unflappable competence. He moves with an efficiency that is almost silent, a human ghost in a well-tailored suit. He placed a single, thick, cream-colored envelope precisely in the center of my desk blotter. "Happy birthday, Noelle," he said, his voice soft. I nodded, my eyes fixed on the structural integrity reports splayed across my screen. "Thank you, Jude." He paused, knowing I do not celebrate the day. He respects the boundary, but his own kindness compels him to mark it. "The finalized bidder list for the eco-district is due by 10, he said, shifting back to business. "You have the presentation review in the main boardroom at 11. "Acknowledged." He left, the heavy glass door hissing shut behind him. I stared at the envelope. 28. It felt like a significant number, a milestone of solidity. My fingers, steady from years of signing blueprints and payroll checks, traced the clean, sharp edge of the cardstock, and then, a reflex I thought I had trained out of myself surfaced. My left thumb slid across my right wrist, finding the scar. It is faint now, barely visible, a pale, silver crescent just below the bone, hidden most days by the strap of my watch. It is not a dramatic scar, not a story of violence, but it is a story of neglect, a thin, precise line, a reminder of a jagged piece of tin siding on a house that was never meant to be permanent, a house I had to climb out of. The memory did not ask for permission, it simply arrived, as it always did on this specific date, arriving like a sudden drop in barometric pressure. 13 years old. The smell of damp wool and sour milk. A cold wave, rising up from the harbor and sliding right through the triple-paned, insulated glass of my tower. It settled in my chest, heavy and cold. I shook my head, a small, sharp movement. Focus. On my desk, dominating the clean expanse of polished mahogany, was the bid, not just any bid, the Glass Bay Eco District. It is a legacy project, a multi-billion-dollar undertaking to transform the derelict North Wharf into a self-sustaining marvel of green engineering, a new lung for the city. This project is not just about profit, though the profit would be astronomical. It is about validation. It is about putting Tide Point Constructors on the national map. It is the culmination of every lesson, every drop of sweat, every 16-hour day my Uncle Gareth poured into me, and that I poured back into his company. The binders were 3 inches thick, dense with material specs, environmental impact studies, and timelines calculated down to the minute. My computer chimed, a soft, digital sound that cut the silence like a scalpel. The email. The subject line was innocuous. Finalist list, Glass Bay Eco District RFP. My hand was steady on the mouse. I clicked. The PDF attachment loaded, crisp and official on my 40-inch monitor. My eyes scanned the municipal letterhead, past the preamble, looking for the names I expected. Kiewit, Bechtel, the usual titans, We were on the list, as expected. And then I saw it. The fourth name on the finalized list of competitors. Pinnacle Urban Design. Project leads. Victor and Elaine Mercer. The air evacuated my lungs. It was not a gasp. It was a complete, systemic failure of my respiratory system. My vision tunneled, the expensive panoramic view of the bay dissolving into a pinpoint of gray light. Pinnacle, Mercer. It has been 15 years. 15 years since I last saw those names written together. 15 years since they were scrawled in a hasty, familiar blue ink on a torn piece of notebook paper. We're gone for a few days. Be good. Eat carefully. V&E. My throat closed. My heart, usually a steady, reliable engine that I kept well maintained, began to hammer against my ribs. A frantic, trapped bird. I could feel the blood draining from my face, the coldness of the memory replaced by a sudden, icy shock. They were not just names, they were ghosts. Ghosts who were supposed to be lost in the Midwest. Ghosts who were supposed to be broke. Ghosts who were supposed to be footnotes in a story I had long since finished writing. But here they were, not only here, in Glass Bay, but here in my world, in my bid, competing for the single most important project of my career. The room, usually my sanctuary of control and quiet, felt suddenly small, airless. I gripped the edge of the mahogany desk. The wood was cold, solid, real, but the names on the screen shimmered. Unreal, like a heat haze rising from hot asphalt. Pinnacle Urban Design. My fingers, moving on autopilot, opened a new browser tab. I typed the name. A sleek website materialized, polished, professional, full of buzzwords like synergy and human-centric architecture. And under the Leadership tab, there they were, bios, photographs. The faces were older, thinner, harder. Victor's hair was gray at the temples. Elaine's smile tighter, etched with lines. But they were the same eyes that had looked past me, through me, the same mouths that had formed the lies. They had built a company. They had scraped themselves up from whatever hole they had crawled into. They had become significant. And now they wanted my project. The intercom buzzed, making me jump, a reaction that infuriated me. Jude's voice, calm, filtered through the speaker. "Noelle, the review team is assembled in the main boardroom. They are ready for you." I tried to answer. My voice caught. I cleared my throat, the sound harsh and dry. "One moment. Jude." A beat of silence. He knew my rhythms. He knew my tells. The slightest deviation was a flare in the dark to him. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his tone shifting from efficient assistant to trusted colleague. The door opened a crack. He saw me. He saw me standing rigid, my knuckles white on the desk, staring at the screen. He did not have to see the screen to know something was wrong. "Should I postpone the 11 o'clock?" he asked quietly. "Should I tell them you are ill?" I turned to face him. I willed the blood back into my face. I forced my lungs to draw air, to take back the oxygen the ghosts had stolen. I manufactured the smile I kept for difficult subcontractors and nervous city planners. It was thin, brittle as spun glass, but it held. "No," I said. My voice was tight, but it did not break. "We are going live. Jude, have them pull up the projections for Phase 1. I will be right there." He studied me for a long second, his gaze sharp. He saw the shift, the sudden drawing up of armor. He nodded once, a sharp dip of his chin. "Understood." The door closed, leaving me in the silence once more. Alone again. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window that served as my office's fourth wall. I pressed the activator, and a segment of the glass slid open with a pneumatic hiss. The sound of the world rushed in, the real sound, the sharp, lonely cry of a gull, the distant thrum of a container ship's engine, the low moan of the foghorn from the point. The wind hit me, cold and smelling of salt, diesel, and wet rock. It was the smell of home, the smell of this home, the one I had earned, the one I had built. I closed my eyes and breathed it in, letting the cold air sting my face, clearing the phantom smell of sour milk. I heard my Uncle Gareth's voice, as clear and solid as if he were standing beside me, his hand on my shoulder, his 3 principles, the foundation of Tide Point, the foundation of me. 1. Honest work. Your hands must be as clean as your concrete. 2. Clean books. A ledger that cannot face the sunlight is a ledger that will bury you. 3. Face it head on, whatever it is, a storm, a bad weld, or the past. You look it in the eye and you do not blink. I opened my eyes. The fog was beginning to lift, revealing the dark, choppy silver of the water below. Face it head on. I walked back to my desk. I picked up the cream-colored envelope. Jude's card. I tore it open. Inside, on the same thick stock, he had simply written, "You built this. Enjoy the view. J." I looked at the multi-billion-dollar proposal that Victor and Elaine Mercer wanted to take from me. Then I looked at the simple, warm birthday card from the only real family I had left. I placed the card directly on top of the Glass Bay Eco District proposal. Not beside it. On top. The warmth was not a competitor to the old wound. It was the shield. My presentation was in less than 10 minutes. My heart was still misfiring, the adrenaline high and sour in my stomach. I needed to control the rhythm. I unlocked my bottom drawer and pulled out a small, digital voice recorder. It was an old tool from my early days, when I was terrified of speaking to anyone other than Gareth. I pressed the small red button. "Section 1, I said, and my voice sounded foreign, too sharp, brittle. I stopped, breathed, started again, forcing my diaphragm to control the airflow. "Good morning. My name is Noelle Archer, president of Tide Point Constructors. We are here today not just to propose a structure, but to partner with Glass Bay on its future." I kept talking, reading the key points from memory. Our proprietary water filtration system, derived from local marshland ecosystems, will exceed the RFP's requirements by 20%. As I spoke the technical jargon, the words that I knew better than my own name, a different image flickered behind my eyes, projected onto the fog outside my window. A different kitchen, not this sleek, silent space, but a cramped room smelling of old grease and damp particle board, linoleum floors, yellowed and curling at the edges where the rain had leaked in, a weak, bare bulb overhead, buzzing. And that note, that goddamned note, held to a Harvest Gold refrigerator by a weak magnet shaped like a cartoon mouse, the paper, cheap notebook paper torn from a spiral, fluttering slightly every time the ancient compressor kicked on with a groan. The only other sound in that kitchen was the relentless tick, tick, tick of the analog clock above the stove, a sound that marked not time, but the absence of it, the sound of waiting. In my office, the sound of the waves from the open window, the sound of real work and a real life, blended with the memory of that ticking clock, creating a disorienting, hollow roar. I clicked the recorder off. My voice was steady now. The tremor was gone. My heart had found its pace. The past was the past. Today, it was just business. They were just competitors. I straightened the cuffs of my blazer. I picked up my tablet, the presentation loaded and ready. I walked out of my office. Jude was waiting, his own tablet in hand. He fell into step beside me, his presence a silent, solid support. "They look ready," he said, nodding toward the boardroom doors. "So are we," I replied. We reached the executive elevator bank to go down to the main conference center on the mezzanine. The polished steel doors slid open with a soft chime. I stepped inside, Jude beside me. As the doors began to slide shut, I caught my reflection in the mirrored surface. My eyes were calm. They were clear. But if you looked closely enough, you could see the tension. You could see the pull. They were the eyes of someone balanced on a high wire, knowing the only way forward was to never, ever look down. The doors closed, sealing me in shadow and steel, ready for the presentation. I was 13 years old. My world was not a tower of glass. It was a sagging, single-wide trailer propped up on cinder blocks in Elm Hollow, Oregon. Elm Hollow was not a town people moved to. It was a place people got stuck in. It sat on the damp, mossy edge of the pine forests, perpetually smelling of wet cedar, pulp mills, and the sour tang of mildew. Our home was a temporary box that had become permanent. It had a corrugated tin roof that amplified the near-constant rain into a deafening drum solo, a sound so loud it vibrated in my teeth. The rain was not a gentle mist. It was a cold, penetrating presence that turned the red dirt yard into a sucking bog and made the particle-board floors of the trailer swell and warp. That day was my 13th birthday. It was a Tuesday in October. The rain had paused, leaving the air heavy and cold, the sky a bruised, yellowish gray. I got off the school bus at our stop, a mile down the main logging road, and walked back, my shoes sucking in the mud. I had let myself hope. I had walked home faster than usual. Elaine, my mother, had been in a decent mood the week before. She had mentioned, in an offhand way, "Maybe we'll do something for your birthday, a store-bought cake or something." A store-bought cake, not one from a box, one from the Safeway in the next town over, the kind with stiff, sugary frosting roses and plastic lettering. I had held on to that maybe for 6 days, turning it over in my mind like a smooth stone. It felt possible. I came home early. I had skipped the after-school library hour, the one place I felt warm, just in case. I ran up the slick, rickety wooden steps, my hand sliding on the splintered railing. "Mom? Dad?" The trailer was silent. Not just quiet, but silent. It was the deep, hollow silence that follows a slammed door. The rain had started again, a light tapping on the tin roof. But inside, the air was still, cold, and dead. They were gone, the old beat-up sedan that Victor, my father, was always fixing, was not in its usual spot by the rotted-out stump. Their good coats, the ones they saved for trips to the city, were gone from the hooks by the door. My hope, that fragile, stupid thing, curdled. I walked into the kitchen. It smelled of old coffee grounds and whatever had gone bad in the back of the refrigerator. The clock above the stove, a yellowed plastic sun, ticked loudly, each sound an accusation. And there it was, stuck to the Harvest Gold refrigerator door with a weak, cartoon mouse magnet, a single piece of notebook paper, torn from a spiral, the edges ragged. The handwriting was Elaine's, a looping, impatient scrawl in blue pen. "We'll be gone for a few days. Something came up. Be good. Eat carefully. V&E." Eat carefully. I opened the refrigerator. The light flickered on, illuminating almost nothing. A half loaf of dry bread, a plastic tub of margarine with crumbs in it, a quart of milk, 2 days past its expiration date, already smelling sharp. In the freezer, a tray of ice cubes and a half-empty bag of frozen peas. They had taken the $34 I had saved from mowing lawns, the money I kept in the world's best dad mug in my room. I did not even have to check. I knew. I sat at the wobbly Formica table. I read the note again and again. A few days. It was Tuesday. Maybe they would be back by Friday. Maybe this was the something that would finally work out. The big opportunity Victor was always chasing. The one that always left us poorer than before. I told myself they would be back. I rationed the bread. 2 slices for breakfast, 2 for dinner. I drank the sour milk anyway, holding my nose. By Thursday, the bread was gone. The milk was gone. The silence in the trailer was no longer empty. It was full. It was a thick, heavy blanket that smothered all other sounds. The fear, which had been a small, cold knot, started to expand. I turned the television on, just for the noise. But the cheerful voices on the game shows felt like a mockery. I turned it off. The ticking clock returned, louder. On Friday, I went to school. I had not slept. The hunger was a dull, constant ache, a hollow feeling that made my head feel light and fuzzy. "Noelle, you look tired." "Honey," said Ms. Gable, my homeroom teacher. Her face was kind. Her eyes crinkled with genuine concern. That concern was more dangerous than the hunger. I forced a smile. Just stayed up late studying for the math test, you know. She nodded, but her eyes lingered. I looked away, my face hot with the lie. I could not tell her. I knew what happened to kids who told. I had seen it. The county car, the nervous social worker, the rumors. They would take me away. They would put me in a home, a place for abandoned children. The words themselves tasted like shame. I would rather be hungry than be that girl. So I smiled. I did the math test, and I pretended. Back in the trailer, I started a list on the inside cover of my science notebook. I drew a small box for each day. I drew a line through Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Saturday, day 5. The hunger was no longer a dull ache. It was a sharp, twisting pain in my stomach. I spent the entire day in bed, wrapped in every blanket I owned, trying to sleep so I would not feel it. The rain hammered the roof, a relentless, angry noise. I cried, but the sound was stolen by the storm. The ink of my tally marks bled and blurred on the page from the moisture in the air. Sunday, day 6. I found a can of green beans in the back of the pantry, hidden behind a box of mouse poison. I opened it with the dull, rusted can opener. My hands shaking so much I cut my finger on the lid. I watched the blood well up, a bright, unbelievable red, and I felt nothing. I just sucked the wound, the metallic taste mixing with the salty brine of the beans. I ate them cold, right out of the tin. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. Monday, day 7. The can of beans was a distant memory. There was nothing left, absolutely nothing. I was hollowed out. I looked at myself in the cracked bathroom mirror. My face was pale, my eyes huge and dark in their sockets. I had to do something. I went to the mug in my room. The one I already knew was empty. I dumped it out anyway. Nothing. I searched under their mattress, in the pockets of the old work coats they had left behind. I found change, a few quarters in the bottom of a boot, dimes and nickels under the sofa cushions, buried with dust and lost crumbs. I counted it out on the floor. $4.67. It was enough for a bag of bread, maybe some peanut butter. I just had to get to the convenience store at the highway junction, 2 miles away. I put on my sneakers, their soles thin and worn, but I stopped at the door. I could not go. What if someone saw me? What if Mr. Henderson from the store asked where my parents were? What if he saw how hungry I was? The shame was stronger than the hunger. It rooted me to the spot. I waited. Another day. Tuesday, day 8. The hunger had passed, twisting pain, and settled into a deep, dizzying weakness. I could not think. I could not stand up too fast. The world felt slow and fuzzy, and I knew, with a terrifying adult clarity, that the hunger would win. It was going to win. I put on Victor's old coat, a flannel-lined canvas jacket that smelled like him, like motor oil, stale cigarettes, and failure. It swallowed me. The sleeves hanging past my fingertips, I put the $4.67 in the pocket. I did not walk toward the convenience store. I walked the other way. I walked the 3 miles of wet red clay road, past the no trespassing signs, past the logging turnoffs, toward the place I had always been told to avoid. The Raven Coach stop. It was not really a bus station. It was a gravel lot with a failing diner, a wall of greasy payphones, and a bus shelter where transient loggers and lost souls waited for the twice-a-day bus to Portland or nowhere. I did not know what I was going to do. Maybe I would just sit. Maybe I would buy a candy bar from the diner. I did not have a plan. I just knew I could not stay in the trailer with the ticking clock for 1 more minute. The air at the stop was thick with new smells, the sharp, acrid bite of diesel fumes from an idling truck, and from the diner, the overwhelming, glorious, sickening smell of hot fry grease. My stomach, empty for so long, cramped violently. It seized up, a fist of pure agony. I doubled over, gagging, right there in the gravel lot. I stumbled back, hiding behind a stack of weather-beaten pallets. A man came out of the diner, a trucker. He was holding a hamburger wrapped in white paper. He took a huge bite. I watched his jaw work. I could almost taste it. My shame was gone. The hunger had finally burned it all away. I was an animal. I was going to ask him. I was going to beg for a piece of his food. I took a step out from behind the pallets. My mouth opened. But the word would not come out. The shame was not gone. It was right there, a hand on my throat, choking me. I shrank back. I could not be that girl. I would rather starve. I turned to run, to go back to the trailer, but my legs felt like water. I sank down onto the wet gravel, the canvas coat pooling around me, and I just stopped. A truck door slammed. Heavy boots crunched on the gravel, coming closer. I flinched, pulling the coat tighter, hoping to be invisible. The boots stopped right in front of me. They were old, leather, stained with grease and mud, but well kept. "You lost, kid?" The voice was deep, rough, like gravel, but not unkind. I shook my head, my face buried in the collar of the coat. "You look lost," the man said. He did not move. He just stood there, a solid, patient presence. "It's cold. You shouldn't be sitting on the ground." I mumbled something. I do not know what. A pause, then a wrapper crinkled. "Here." I looked up. Just a crack. A man was squatting in front of me. He was not a trucker. He was older. His hair a thick, unruly mix of dark gray and black, salt and pepper. He had a strong nose and lines around his eyes that looked like they came from squinting into the sun, not from smiling. He was holding a candy bar, a simple, chocolate candy bar. My hand came out of the sleeve of its own accord. My fingers, chapped and white, closed around it. "Thank you," I whispered. My voice was a croak. "What's your name?" he asked, his eyes sharp, scanning my face. "Noelle." "Noelle. That's a good, strong name. I'm Gareth. You live around here? Noelle?" I nodded, my fingers tearing at the wrapper. I did not wait. I shoved a piece in my mouth. The chocolate and peanuts were so sweet, so rich. It made my eyes water. "Easy," he said, his voice softening. "Don't get sick." He watched me eat the entire bar, a slow, methodical observation. He was not judging. He was assessing, like a builder looking at a piece of land. "Where are your folks, Noelle?" The question, the one I had been dreading, the lie came to my lips automatically. "They're inside, in the diner." Gareth Archer looked at the diner, then back at me, at my thin, pale face, at the oversized, filthy coat. He knew. "What's your last name, kid?" he asked, and this time, his voice was not patient. It was sharp, focused, like a tool. "Why?" "Just tell me, what's your last name?" I hesitated, but he had given me food, and he was not a cop. He was something else. "Mercer," I said. "Noelle Mercer." Gareth Archer froze. It was not a big movement. He just stopped. His eyes, which had been sharp, went wide, and then dark. He stared at me as if I had just changed shape in front of him. He said the name, very low, under his breath. "Mercer." He stood up, not taking his eyes off me. "Victor and Elaine Mercer. Is that their names?" I nodded, my stomach starting to cramp again, this time from fear. How did he know? He cursed, a short, sharp word that cut the damp air. He turned and looked at the logging road I had come from. "My God. Elaine," he whispered. Then he looked back at me, and his face was completely different. The assessment was gone. The suspicion was gone. He looked devastated. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old, brick-like cell phone. He dialed a number. "Yes, this is Gareth Archer," he said, his voice now booming with an authority I had not heard. "I'm at the Raven coach stop on Highway 26. I need to report a child abandonment. Yes, I'm with the child now. No, she's safe. Her name is Noelle Mercer. She's my niece." He snapped the phone shut and looked down at me. I was just staring. the candy bar wrapper clutched in my hand, my mind reeling. Niece? He squatted down again, his knees popping. He was close now. He put a hand, large and calloused, on the shoulder of the coat. "I am so sorry," he said, and his voice was thick. "I am so sorry. I didn't know. I should have—" He shook his head, angry at himself. Your mother, Elaine, she was my sister, my half-sister. We haven't spoken in almost 20 years. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw my own eyes reflected back. "They're not coming back, are they?" I whispered, the last piece of stupid hope finally dying. Gareth's expression tightened. "No, kid, they're not. But that's not on you. You hear me?" He leaned in, his gaze compelling. "You did nothing wrong. This is not your fault. This is their failure. Theirs, not yours." I started to cry, not the quiet, hopeless tears of the last week, but huge, heaving, shuddering sobs. The candy bar, the cold, the fear, the relief. It all broke me. Gareth did not shush me. He did not pat my back. He just waited for the first wave to pass. Then he put his arms around me, right around the filthy, oversized coat, and pulled me into a hug. It was not a soft hug. It was a strong, solid, crushing embrace, like being held by a rock. He smelled of sawdust, coffee, and the cold, clean air of the coast. "You're done, Noelle," he said, his voice rumbling against my ear. "You're done being hungry. You're done waiting. You're coming with me." A sheriff's car pulled into the lot, its lights off. Gareth lifted me up. I was 13, but I weighed nothing. He carried me to his silver pickup truck, the one I had not even noticed, and put me in the passenger seat. He spoke to the deputy, his voice a low, angry rumble. Papers were signed. He came back and threw a heavy blanket over me. He got in, started the engine, and cranked the heater. Hot, dusty air blasted my face. He put the truck in gear and pulled out of the Raven Coach stop, turning west, toward the ocean, away from Elm Hollow. I did not look back. I just sat there, wrapped in a strange man's blanket, in a strange man's truck, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt the unmistakable, terrifying, and profound sensation of being safe. Gareth's house was not a house. It was a fortress. It was built of gray, local stone, the kind you saw in the cliffs, and it was perched on a headland in Port Howland, looking straight out at the black, volcanic rocks and the chaos of the Pacific, where my old trailer had been crushed by the damp. This house leaned into it, defiant. The wind that had terrified me in Elm Hollow was here, just a constant, salty breath that rattled the thick window panes and made the fire in the hearth draw better. The first morning, I woke up to two things I had never experienced: the smell of burning pine from the fireplace, which he kept going year-round, and the complete, profound silence of not being hungry. I came downstairs to find him in the kitchen, a big, bright room with a slate floor. He was not a complicated cook. He had 2 eggs in a cast-iron pan, a thick slice of toast, and a glass of orange juice. He put an identical plate in front of me. "Eat," he said. It was not a suggestion. We ate in silence. When I was finished, I took my plate to the sink. "Leave it," he said. "We have work." He led me to his office, a room that smelled of old paper, leather, and pencil shavings. From a shelf, he took down a brand-new, leather-bound book. It was a simple, unlined ledger. He placed it on the desk in front of me. "This is yours." He opened it to the first page and wrote my name, Noelle Archer, in a strong, clear hand. Not Mercer, Archer. He had already begun the legal process of adoption, a fact he stated as simply as if he were ordering rebar. "You're a blank slate, kid. That's a gift. Don't waste it." He handed me a pen. "From now on, you write down every penny you spend, even if I give it to you, even if you find it, and every penny that comes in, when you start earning it." He tapped the cover. "This is the most important lesson I will ever teach you. People go broke because they don't look. They're afraid to see the numbers. You look every single day. You manage your money. You manage your life. Got it?
Got it, I whispered.
Good. Now, the rules of this house. Bed by 9:30 on school nights, up at 6. You will learn to cook for yourself and for me. You will learn to mend your own clothes. I won't have you depending on anyone for your own survival, least of all me. And so my new life began. It was a life of rigid, comforting structure. I learned to sleep through the night, a deep, dreamless sleep I had never known. I learned to make a perfect omelet. I learned a basic stitch to patch the knees of my new, sturdy jeans. And I learned to read contracts. Gareth did not believe in kids' work. My homework from the coastal high school took me an hour. My work for him took all evening. He would come home from the Tide Point yard, smelling of concrete dust and welding smoke, and spread a set of blueprints on the massive dining room table. "Where's the load-bearing wall?" he would ask. I would find it. "What's the shear strength specification on this I-beam?" I would find the call-out, learn what shear strength meant, and read it back. Good. Now, does that match the supply chain contract? He had me read Tide Point's contracts like they were thrillers. I learned about liability clauses, insurance bonds, and force majeure. He taught me how to read the fine print. The lines where, he said, the real money is always won or lost. In the afternoons, he took me with him. I went from being a ghost in a trailer to a fixture on his construction sites. He gave me my own hard hat, white, like his, and a high-visibility vest. I was 13, then 14, a thin girl walking among giants in steel-toed boots. "Look at this," he would say, stopping by a concrete pour. He would tap the wooden forms with his hammer. "Hear that? That thunk? That's solid. That's a good pour." He would point to another section. "Hear that thud? It's hollow. There's a void. Make them re-pour it." He taught me to trust my senses, to feel the work, to listen to what the materials were telling me. I was learning, I was building, I was becoming something new, forged in the noise of the yard and the quiet discipline of the ledger. And then Ronan came home. Ronan Archer, Gareth's only son, was 22. He had been away at college, a business school back east. I knew about him only from a single, framed photo in Gareth's office, a handsome, grinning young man in a football uniform. He arrived for the summer with 2 monogrammed suitcases, a car that was too fast for the winding coastal roads, and a smile that was bright, charming, and completely cold. He found me at the dining table, cross-referencing invoices. He leaned against the doorframe, all casual grace, looking me up and down. Well, he said, his voice smooth. "So you're the stray." I said nothing. I just looked at him. He had Gareth's strong build, but his eyes were different. Where Gareth's were clear and sharp, Ronan's were restless, assessing, and full of a deep, simmering resentment. That night, at dinner, the fragile piece of my new life fractured. The tension was immediate, a static charge in the air. Gareth served his usual simple, hearty meal, roast chicken and potatoes. Ronan pushed his food around his plate. "It's cozy, Dad," Ronan said, gesturing around the solid, warm room. "Still playing the humble builder?" "I am a humble builder," Gareth said, not rising to the bait. Ronan's eyes landed on me. I was cutting my chicken, my movements precise. He smiled that bright, false smile. "So, Noelle," he said, drawing my name out. "Dad tells me you're getting the full apprenticeship, reading blueprints, tapping concrete. What's the plan? The kid from the Raven coach stop playing at being an engineer?" The words hit me like a physical blow. The kid from the Raven coach stop. He had used the exact place. He had aimed. The clatter of my knife and fork hitting the porcelain plate was shockingly loud in the quiet room. I froze, my face burning. I could feel the trailer, the gravel, the taste of that first candy bar. Ronan's smile widened. He had hit his target. "That's enough," Gareth said. His voice was not loud. It was low and flat, and held a coldness I had never heard him use with me. "What? It's just a joke," Ronan said, throwing his hands up in mock surrender. "Can't the kid take a joke?" "She is not the kid," Gareth said, placing his own silverware down, perfectly aligned. "She is Noelle. She is family, and this house has room for you both." He looked from me to his son. "Jealousy just crowds it. Ronan, don't crowd my house." Ronan stared at his father for a long, silent moment. The charm vanished, replaced by a pure, unfiltered anger. He stood up so abruptly his chair scraped, a sound like a scream against the slate floor. "Whatever," he spat. "I'm going out. This place is dead anyway." He grabbed his keys and was gone. The front door slammed, and the house seemed to shudder. We sat in the silence. The food on our plates was cold. The tension remained, a thick, oily slick on the surface of the room. Gareth did not apologize for his son. He did not comfort me. He simply picked up his knife and fork. "Eat your dinner, Noelle," he said. "Your work isn't finished." That night, I did not cry. I did not tally the wound. I just went to my room, opened my science homework, and finished it. At the new school, the Coastal High School, I was an anomaly. I excelled. I was a straight-A student. But I was quiet. I was the girl who sat in the back, took perfect notes, and never, ever volunteered personal information. "Where did you move from?" "Noelle?" a girl in my English class asked. "Up north," I would say. "What does your dad do?" "He's in construction." "Do you have any brothers or sisters?" "No." My answers were short, precise, and technically true. They were calculations, designed to end the conversation. I learned to be pleasant but impenetrable. I found my only solace outside of Gareth's fortress and the construction sites in the ocean itself. During that first year, Gareth took me down to the beach during a winter storm. The waves were not the gentle ripples of summer. They were monsters, mountains of black water capped in foam, exploding against the rocks, sending spray 100 feet into the air. The sound was a physical roar that you felt in your bones. I found myself shrinking back, terrified of its power. Gareth stood beside me, unmoving. "You can't fight it," he yelled over the wind. "You'll lose. You don't fight it. You don't run. You just plant your feet, brace yourself, and you breathe. You let it hit you, and you stay standing." I learned to breathe. I learned to stand on the wet sand, my calves aching, and let the surge wash over my boots, pulling at me, and I held my ground. I used it. I used it when Ronan was home from college. His presence a constant, low-grade irritant. I used it when he would walk into the office and accidentally knock over a stack of blueprints I had just organized. I used it when I would hear him on the phone, laughing with his friends about my dad's little charity case. I would just plant my feet, breathe, let the wave of his hostility hit me, and stay standing. He was just noise. He was just a bad pour. During those years, there was another presence, a quieter one. Jude. He was an intern at Tide Point, a few years older than Ronan, a local kid working his way through community college. He was quiet, like me, but where I was silent, he was discreet. He was the one who actually ran the office, even though his title was just assistant. He saw me struggling with Gareth's ancient, DOS-based scheduling program. He did not offer to help. He just left a 3-page, word-processed manual on my desk, entitled "A Faster Way to Do This." It was clear, concise, and it worked. One afternoon, I was drafting an email to a difficult subcontractor who was late on a delivery. Gareth had told me to light a fire under him. I had written a 4-paragraph essay, full of frustration. Jude walked past, paused, and read it over my shoulder. "Too many words," he said softly. He took the mouse, deleted my entire draft, and typed. Subject: PO 45A88. Delivery status required Mr. Henderson. Per our contract, the steel trusses were due EOD Tuesday. Please provide a revised delivery time and an explanation for the delay by 4 p.m. today, or we will be forced to enact the penalty clause. Regards, Tide Point Constructors. That, he said, is how you send an email that gets a response. He nodded and walked away. I studied that email. It was cold. It was precise. It was perfect. It was a new kind of power. That night, the night before I turned 15, I sat in my room at the stone house. I had finished my homework. I had mended a tear in my coat. I had read 2 contracts for a new jetty. I opened my leather-bound ledger. I looked at the pages, a year's worth of entries, written in my own, increasingly confident hand. Every piece of candy, every notebook, every movie ticket, a perfect, unbroken record of my new life. I closed the book. The leather cover was smooth and cool under my hand. I ran my thumb over the embossed title. I did not put it back on the shelf. I walked to my antique wooden bureau, the one Gareth had salvaged from an old hotel, and I opened the bottom drawer. I placed the ledger inside, beneath my neatly folded sweaters. I did not need it on my desk anymore. The rules were inside me now. The structure was my own. I was no longer the girl from the bus stop. I was not even the girl who was learning. I was Noelle Archer, and I was ready for the work. At 19, the letters of acceptance were just paper. They came from big-name universities back east, places with ivy and reputations, offering me a clean, academic escape. I read them, and I saw a different kind of running away. I saw 4 years of theory, 4 years of being removed from the actual work. I declined them all. I enrolled in an online civil engineering program, a brutal, self-motivated curriculum I could tackle at night. My days belonged to Tide Point, not the office, not if I could help it. My days belonged to the field. I was 19, I had my own hard hat, and I lived in my steel-toed boots. My office was the back of a Tide Point pickup, the dashboard my filing cabinet, the thermos of black coffee my fuel. My first real test was Breakwater Park. The city wanted a pedestrian bridge, a graceful, arched thing to span the inlet. The Tide Point engineers, good, solid, by-the-book men, had drafted a standard steel truss design. It was strong, it was expensive, it was heavy. I spent 3 nights with the plans spread across Gareth's dining table, my laptop glowing beside them, running calculations. I was just a field apprentice, I knew that, but I also knew the wind shear on that point, and I knew the cost of steel. I found a different way, a stressed ribbon design, thinner, using post-tensioned cables within the concrete deck. It would be more elegant. Use 60% less structural steel, and if my math was right, be stronger against the lateral forces of the coastal wind. I asked for a meeting with the chief engineer, a man named Sal. He had boots older than I was. "You got an idea," he said, not unkindly, looking at my drawings. "That's good, but this is a lot of new school math. Noelle, we trust the trusses." "The math works," I said, my voice steady. I pointed to the load calculations. "This isn't theory. The steel savings alone will put us 10% under budget, and the increased tensile strength gives us a longer maintenance-free lifespan." He chewed on an unlit cigar for a full minute, just looking at my screen. "Run the numbers again," he ordered. With the seismic factor doubled, I did, right there. "It holds." He looked at me, then at Gareth, who was leaning in the doorway, silent. Sal grunted. "Well, I'll be damned. It's a better bridge," he nodded. "Draw it up for the city. It's a good proposal." Gareth said nothing until we were back in the truck, the smell of diesel and salt air filling the cab. He just put a hand on my shoulder, squeezed once, and said, "Good work." It felt like winning a war. My victory prize was a new assignment. Gareth dropped a 3-inch binder on my desk, the existing Tide Point safety manual. "It's out of date," he said. "The insurance carrier wants a new one. This is your baby now." For a week, I read every OSHA regulation, every accident report from the last 10 years. But then I went to the field. I talked to the crews, the welders, the carpenters, the rebar crew. "Sure, we got a manual." One of the foremen, a man named Diaz, told me, his face weathered. "We got rules. But you know what the real rule is? Don't slow down the pour. Don't stop the weld. A guy gets hurt. It's 'cause he was clumsy. He complains. He's a liability. The problem was not the rules. The problem was fear. The problem was silence. I spent a night rewriting the entire introduction. I kept all the regulations, all the procedures, but I added a new section, a new company policy I wrote myself, right at the front. I titled it, "Silence is not compliance." The clause was simple. It stated that any worker, at any level, who remained silent about a safety concern was just as non-compliant as the person who broke the rule. It established an anonymous, direct-to-me reporting system. It guaranteed, in writing, that any worker who initiated a safety stop would be protected from all repercussions, and that supervisors who discouraged reporting would be terminated. When I gave the draft to Gareth, he read that page 3 times. He looked up at me. "You're declaring war on a lot of old-school foremen." "I'm declaring war on accidents," I said, "and on the lawsuits they cause." He tapped the page. "This is going to cost us money in the short term. Stoppages, delays. It will save us millions in the long term, and it's the right thing to do." He smiled, a rare, unmade smile. "Get it to the printers." That was the same month Ronan decided to join the family business. He did not arrive in steel-toed boots. He arrived in a new dark blue suit, his hair slicked back, his shoes made of gleaming, soft Italian leather. He took the corner office that had been empty, the one with the better view of the bay. He did not come to the sites. He stayed in the conference rooms. "Had a big meeting with the zoning board. Dad," he would announce at dinner. "They love the Tide Point name. We're royalty here." He found me one afternoon in the yard, covered in dust, checking a rebar layout. He was on his way to a client lunch. He winced as he stepped carefully around a patch of mud, holding his briefcase. "Noel, really?" he said, his voice laced with amusement. "We're a construction company. I get it. But you're taking the construction part a little too literally. All this dust. It's hell on my good shoes." He laughed, as if he had made a clever joke, and got into his sedan, leaving me in his dust-free exhaust. He was in the office, but his mind was elsewhere, and I was beginning to suspect, so were our documents. The rumors started small, a whisper from a supplier. "Funny," he said to me over coffee. "Your bid on the new foundation work was good, but Kroll Contractors, theirs was just a little better, almost like they knew our exact number." Then, a subcontractor for our HVAC systems mentioned seeing Ronan at a high-end steakhouse with the head of a rival firm. "Looked real friendly," the man said, shrugging. "Probably nothing." It was not nothing. I did not go to Gareth. He was my uncle, but he was Ronan's father. I would not put him in that position, and I would not confront Ronan. A direct fight would be messy, emotional, and I had no hard proof. He would just lie, and I would look like the jealous, ungrateful stray he always called me. So I went to the system. I went to Jude. "Jude," I said, closing his office door, "I need to tighten our document security." He did not ask why. He just turned to his keyboard. "What did you have in mind?" "Everything," I said. "I want a new internal server, firewalled from the outside. I want all bid proposals to be watermarked, digitally tagged to the user who accesses them. I want tiered access. Ronan can see the high-level financials. He can see the public-facing bids, but the cost analysis, the supplier-specific numbers, the proprietary formulas, that gets locked down, and only you, me, and Gareth have the key. And I want a log, a detailed access log of every time he or anyone opens one of those high-level files." Jude's fingers flew. "It's a new permissions protocol," he said. "I can have it live by Monday." "Do it." I was not building a wall. I was building a trap. I was setting up a clean, clear, digital ledger. While Ronan was busy building his network, I was focused on ours. Tide Point won a new bid. It was not glamorous. It was not a multi-million-dollar park. It was a small, 30-unit social housing project in the Old Mill District. Ronan was disgusted. "It's a charity case," He argued at our weekly planning meeting. The margins are razor thin. We're wasting resources. It's a guaranteed contract with the county, I countered. And it's good work. We're building homes. Gareth slammed his hand on the table. We're building it. It's good work. Noel, you're the project lead. Ronan, you stick to the zoning board. I took the job seriously. The first thing I did was meet with the crews we were hiring, many of them local guys who needed the work, and I looked at the payroll schedule. The industry standard, especially on low-margin jobs, was to float payroll. Pay when you got paid. Pay a week late, 2 weeks late. Use the worker's money as your own short-term loan. This is how it's done, our accountant insisted. It's standard practice. It's not our practice, I said. Not anymore. We pay on Friday, every Friday, full check, no exceptions. Ronan laughed. She's so idealistic. It's cute. She'll learn. I did not learn. I insisted. I moved money from the contingency fund to guarantee the payroll account. The first 2 weeks, the crews were wary. By the third Friday, when the checks were there, on time, as promised, the mood on the site changed. The work got faster. The work got better. And then the storm hit. A container ship strike at the port of Tacoma. Our entire shipment of structural steel was stuck on a boat, 100 miles north. The project was dead in the water. The delay lasted 6 days. The steel finally arrived on a Thursday afternoon. A week behind schedule. We had lost the entire buffer. I went to the site, ready to beg, to offer bonuses, to do whatever it took to get the crews to work the weekend. Diaz, the foreman, met me at the gate. It's here, I said, stating the obvious. We see that, he said. I need you. I need the crew. We have to get this frame up by Monday, or the inspectors will shut us down for another week. Diaz just nodded. He turned to the crew, who were packing up. All right, you heard her. Steel's in. We're dark tomorrow for the holiday, but we're back on Saturday, 6 a.m., and we're working through Sunday. Not a single man groaned. They just nodded, packed their tools, and left. I looked at Diaz, stunned. You didn't even ask them. Didn't have to, he said, putting on his own hard hat. You made payroll. You respected us. We'll get your building framed. Now get out of the way. Archer, we got work to do. They worked 72 hours straight through. They made up the entire week. That Monday, Gareth was at the site. He was just watching the last of the I-beams being hoisted into place, right on schedule. He was quiet for a long time. You'll learn, he said, and I thought he was going to say, I'd been lucky. You'll learn that most people think reputation is a poster you hang on the wall, a slogan, a nice logo. He pointed up at the welders, the sparks flying. It's not. Reputation is a timesheet. It's a payroll check that clears. It's the promise you kept when it was hard. He looked at me, and his eyes were proud. You did good work here, Noel. I wrote that down, not in my ledger, in my head. Reputation is a timesheet. Ronan was furious. He did not understand. He saw the overtime, the expense, the coddling of the crew. He could not see the asset I had just built, the loyalty that was now Tide Points. He stopped coming to dinner. He started spending more time away from the office, his days filled with meetings I could not find on any calendar. He came home late, if at all, smelling of expensive cologne and whiskey, his eyes bright with a slick, easy money fever. His new friends were not builders. They were not from Port Howland. They were from Rivergate, a new, fast money investment crowd that was buying up the waterfront. I let him go. I had my new security protocols. I had my crews. I had my work. Then, last night, I got the email. It was late. I was at my desk, finishing my online classwork. It came from a burner account, a string of nonsense letters. The subject line was just, check your house. The body of the message was 2 sentences. He took them. The blueprints for the garage trash chute. The fire is lit. Be careful. The trash chute, not the structural steel, not the foundation, a small, insignificant, ancillary piece of the project, but it was specific. It was a test, and it was a theft, I checked the server logs. Ronan's account. Accessed at 10:14 p.m. File downloaded. SH trash shoot detail PDF. The anonymous sender was right. He was not just talking, he was stealing. The fire was lit, and I knew exactly who had struck the match. The cough began as a minor irritation, a dry hack that Gareth blamed on seasonal allergies or concrete dust, but it did not go away. It settled in his chest and deepened, becoming a harsh, rattling sound that would seize him in the middle of a sentence, leaving him breathless and pale. The master of the job site, the man who could project his voice over a dozen pieces of heavy machinery, was now being silenced by his own body. The diagnosis came on a gray November morning, delivered in a sterile beige room by a doctor who could not meet our eyes. Progressive pulmonary fibrosis. The words were soft, clinical. The meaning was brutal. His lungs were scarring themselves, turning from flexible tissue to rigid, useless fiber. "It's from the dust," Gareth whispered in the truck on the way home, his voice raw. All those years, before the masks, before the regulations, all that dust, I breathed it all. Life, which had been a race, became a negotiation. The man who had climbed scaffolding like a mountain goat was now tethered to a clear plastic tube, a portable oxygen tank hissing beside him, a constant, shushing reminder of his decline. I did not stop. I adapted. My world, which had been the field, now contracted to the cab of my truck. I rescheduled my days. Mornings were for the sights, running from pour to pour before the sun was high. Afternoons were for him. I drove him to his treatments, the twice-weekly appointments in the city, an hour's drive each way. The passenger seat of my pickup became his new office, and the waiting room of the pulmonary clinic became mine. While he sat in a vinyl recliner, a needle in his arm, I sat in the hard plastic chair outside, my own hard hat on my knees. I spread blueprints across the narrow tables meant for old magazines. I took calls from foremen, my voice low. "If the rebar isn't tied by 3, we'll lose the light. Get Diaz on it." I redlined supplier contracts, my pen scratching in the quiet, sterile air. I would look up and see him through the glass, his eyes closed, his face thin and gray. He was shrinking. The man who had been a fortress of stone and strength was being hollowed out from the inside, but his mind, his gaze, when he opened his eyes and caught me looking, was just as sharp. He would tap his watch, point at the blueprints, work. Ronan's visits were a different kind of pain. He would arrive, not in his sleek sedan, but in a new, absurdly large SUV, the kind his Rivergate friends drove. He would stride into the house, bringing a gust of cold air and expensive cologne. He would not sit. He would stand in the doorway of Gareth's office, where my uncle now spent most of his days, his hands in the pockets of his fine wool coat, his eyes darting around, as if he were already measuring the place for new furniture. "Hey, Dad," he would say, his voice bright and hollow. "Just checking in. Got a big meeting down in Rivergate, looking at a new acquisition." He would check his watch, a showy, complicated timepiece. "Looking good, Dad. Looking strong." Gareth would just look at him, his breath hissing through the cannula. Ronan? Are you looking strong?" Ronan would laugh, a short, sharp sound, missing the point entirely. "Always. Hey, gotta run. Time is money." One afternoon, I was walking Ronan out. He stopped on the porch, looking out at the gray, churning ocean. "He looks like hell," Ronan said, not as a statement of grief, but as an observation of an inconvenience. I said nothing. He turned to me, his smile slipping, his face hardening with that familiar, restless greed. "Don't get too comfortable, Noelle. You're a great nurse. But I am his son. This." He waved his hand at the house, at the ocean, at the invisible empire of Tide Point. "All of this, the company is coming to me. It's my birthright. Always was." He did not wait for a reply. He just got in his expensive car and drove away, tires spinning on the gravel. Birthright. He had never built a thing. He had never made payroll. He thought it was his, by blood. Gareth had taught me it was only yours if you earned it, by sweat. 2 days later, Gareth called his lawyer. He was weak, his voice a strained whisper, but his eyes were clear. He sat at his big oak desk, the oxygen tank hissing beside him like a snake. "Thank you for coming. David," he said to the lawyer, a quiet man I knew from our contract reviews. "Noelle, stay. I want you to hear this." I stood by the window, my arms crossed, watching the gulls fight the wind. I did not want to be there. "I'm making a new will," Gareth said, his voice gaining a thin, reedy strength. "A final one." He laid it out, as clear and precise as a blueprint. The house, the fortress of stone on the headland, would go to me. The small cabin on the lake, the place he and Ronan used to fish, would go to Ronan, a trust fund. Enough for a comfortable life would be established for Ronan, managed by an independent executor. And then the work. "Tide Point Constructors," Gareth said, his breath catching. He took a long pull from the oxygen mask. "My controlling interest, 100% of my shares, they go to Noelle Archer, effective immediately upon my death." The lawyer, David, did not even blink. He just made a note. "And in the event of Ms. Archer's—" "She's tougher than all of us," Gareth rasped. "But if it happens, the company is to be dissolved, its assets liquidated and placed in a trust for the education of skilled tradesmen in Oregon. It will not be broken up, it will not be sold, and it will not go to my son." I turned from the window, my heart hammering. "Gareth." He held up a hand, a command I had learned never to disobey. "This is not a conversation. No, Dell, it is a decision." He looked at me, his eyes sharp, demanding I understand. "It is not about love, kid. I love my son. I love you. This is about suitability. This is about the work." He pointed a long, thin finger at the desk, at the Tide Point logo on his letterhead. "This is a living thing. It's not a toy. It's not a prize. It's a responsibility. It's a payroll for 50 families. It's a reputation. Ronan sees it as a bank. You." He looked at me. "You see it as a job. The job is yours." He picked up the pen, his hand, which had once signed million-dollar contracts with a flourish, was shaking so violently he could not make it to the paper. "Damn it," he whispered. A flash of the old anger. I stepped forward. I put my hand over his, my calluses against his thin, papery skin. I steadied his hand. Together, we signed his name. David, the lawyer, packed his briefcase, his face impassive. "I'll file this with the county. Gareth—" "You do that," Gareth said. When we were alone, he seemed to have used his last bit of strength. He leaned back, his eyes closed. I adjusted the tube on his face. He grabbed my wrist. His grip surprisingly strong. His eyes opened, and they were burning. "Listen to me, Noelle," he whispered, his voice urgent. "2 things. You remember. You hear me?" I nodded. "Don't build hollow structures," he said, his fingers tightening. "What's inside? What's behind the wall? It's all that matters. You build it solid. You build it true. Even if no one will ever see it." "I will," I said. "Second," he pulled me closer. "Don't keep dirty books. Your ledger, my ledger, the one you keep in your head. You keep it clean. You owe what you owe. You pay what you pay. You never, ever lie on the books. It's the first thing that rots. You promise me." "I promise," I said, my throat tight. "Clean books, Gareth, always." He let go. He let out a long, slow breath, like a pour of concrete settling. "Good," he whispered. "That's my good girl. That's the work." He fell asleep in his chair. He held on for 3 more weeks. The rain returned. A cold, relentless winter rain. I moved a cot into his office, working by the light of a single lamp, listening to the twin sounds of the rain on the roof and the hiss of his oxygen. One night, the rain stopped. A deep, profound quiet settled over the headland, the silence of a held breath. I woke up from a shallow doze. The hissing of the oxygen tank had stopped. I looked over. He was asleep, his face peaceful in the moonlight, the cannula on the pillow beside him, but he was not breathing. The silence was absolute. I went to his side. I took his hand. It was still warm. I sat on the floor, my head on the arm of his chair, and I held his hand as it cooled. I held it until the sun came up, a gray, watery line of light over the black, calm ocean. I did not cry. I just held his hand, in the quiet. The funeral was brief, just as he would have wanted. We stood on the headland, the wind whipping our hair, just me, Jude, the lawyer, and a few of his oldest foremen. Diaz was there, Sal was there. Ronan was late. He arrived just as the small urn was being presented, his hair a mess, his eyes red, not from crying, but from a sleepless, angry night. I took the urn. I walked to the edge of the cliff, and I gave the man who had saved me back to the wind and the water he loved. The ashes caught the light, a gray-white plume, and vanished into the black, lacy chop of the waves below. Ronan stood back, his hands in the pockets of his suit. He picked up a single, wild sea rose, and threw it over the edge, not even watching it fall. Back at the house, the air was thick. We sat in Gareth's office, the empty chair at the desk looming over us all. David, the lawyer, opened his briefcase. "This is the last will and testament of Gareth Archer," he said, his voice flat. He began to read. Ronan was bouncing his leg, a frantic, jittery motion. When David read the part about the lake cabin, Ronan nodded, as if expecting it. When he read the part about the trust fund, Ronan scoffed. "A trust? Like I'm a child?" And when David read the part about Tide Point Constructors, and my name, the world stopped. Ronan's leg stopped bouncing. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock in the kitchen. The one I had forgotten was there. "What?" Ronan said, a small, confused sound. David, unflappable, continued reading. 100% of the controlling shares. "No," Ronan said, his voice rising. "No, read it again." "It is clear, Mr. Archer," David said. "No," Ronan shot to his feet, his face, which I had only seen as handsome and slick, contorting into something ugly, something I recognized from the trailer, a mask of pure childish rage. "It's not clear. It's absurd. It's insane." He pointed at me, his hand shaking. "Her! He gave it to her? The stray? The charity case he picked up at a bus stop? While I am his son, his blood." He kicked his chair. It crashed into the wall, splintering the wood. "This is not legal. It's not fair." "Ronan," David said, his voice firm. "Your father was of perfectly sound mind. He was explicit in his reasoning." "His reasoning?" Ronan laughed, a high, unhinged sound. "She poisoned him. She got in his head. She stole it from me. She stole my life." He lunged, not at me, but at the desk, sweeping his arm across it, sending papers, pens, a heavy glass of water, flying. The will, the document itself, fluttered to the floor. "I will fight this. I will see you in hell," he screamed at me, his face purple, spittle flying from his lips. And then he was gone. He stormed out of the house, the front door slamming so hard a picture fell off the wall. We heard the engine of his SUV roar to life, the sound of his tires spitting gravel, and then silence. David sighed. He knelt, his knees cracking, and began to pick up the scattered papers. "I anticipated a poor reaction," he said dryly, "but that was theatrical." I did not move. I was looking at the floor, where the will had landed. A small silver paperclip had fallen from the stack. It lay on the dark, slate floor, catching the gray light from the window. A small, insignificant, metal thing, a thing for holding work together. I bent down. David thought I was helping. but I just picked up the paperclip. It was cold in my hand. I closed my fist around it. A milestone. The moment the jealousy was no longer just words, the moment it became a declaration of war. "Let's get this filed." "David," I said, my voice perfectly calm. I slipped the paperclip into my pocket. That night, I was alone in the fortress for the first time. The house was too quiet. The hissing was gone. I was in Gareth's office, going through the books, the real books, when I heard it, a sound from town, the distant alarm from the Tide Point Yard office. I called Jude. "I'm on my way," he said, his voice already tight. When I got there, the police were already there. The yard was fine. It was the office building, a window on the ground floor, in the archives room, had been pried open. "What did they take?" I asked the officer. Jude was already at the server. "They didn't touch the computers. The new protocols held." "They didn't take the payroll," the office manager said. Frantic, I walked to the archives. The floor was littered with empty blueprint tubes. They had been specific. I went to the master cabinet. The lock was broken. I pulled open the drawer. "The vault," I whispered. They were gone. Every single copy. The complete, proprietary, as-built plans for our subterranean technical vaults. The ones we used for secure infrastructure. The most complex. Secret part of our designs. The fire was no longer lit. The fire was spreading. And now, it had an accelerant. The anonymous email had been a warning. The break-in was a declaration. The article on the front page of the Port Howland Ledger was the first public shot. Jude placed the newspaper on my desk, his face a mask of grim efficiency. The ink was still fresh. The headline was 4 words, printed in an aggressive, bold font. Tide Point in troubled waters? The subheader was the real poison. Internal emails suggest financial misconduct, possible money laundering in local firm. My blood did not run cold. It turned to acid. They had not just stolen blueprints. They had stolen emails. They had taken internal memos, cost projections, and private supplier negotiations, all bundled together and presented, out of context, to a reporter hungry for a local giant to fall. "They're quoting an email I sent to Sal about the housing project," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "The one about moving the contingency funds to cover the payroll guarantee. They're framing it as raiding project funds for unauthorized use. The phone lines for finance and PR are already overloaded," Jude said. "Our partners on the Breakwater project are pausing to review, and our stock on the supplemental market has dropped 8% since 9 a.m. 50 families, Gareth's voice, reputation is a timesheet, and Ronan had just taken a blowtorch to ours. Get me a list of every partner, every subcontractor, and every journalist who has called," I ordered, standing up. "Jude, I need a cybersecurity team, not local. I don't care what it costs. I want the best. I want a digital forensics team that can trace a shadow. Get them on a plane." "Already on it," Jude said. "I'm routing all press calls to my desk. What do I tell them?" "You tell them Ms. Archer has called an open press conference for tomorrow at noon, and you tell them to bring their accountants." He raised an eyebrow. "Accountants?" "We are opening our books," I said, feeling a cold, clear certainty settle over me. "All of them. To everyone. Clean books. Jude. Gareth's first rule. We're going to prove it." The team I hired was a small, brutally efficient group from Seattle. They did not work in our office. They worked from a secure cloud, operating like ghosts in our system. Within 24 hours, they had their first report. The breach wasn't from the outside. Ms. Archer, the team lead, a woman with a voice like dry ice, told me over a secure line. It was an inside vulnerability, an old executive account that was never fully decommissioned. "Whose?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Ronan Archer." It still had low-level access to the archives and the email server. The digital trace on the download logs is muddy. They used a VPN, but the initial access point, the IP address that woke the account up, it's not local. It's from a residential tower in Rivergate, the North Pier Lofts. The North Pier lofts, the gleaming glass and steel monument to new, fast, and questionable money, the place Ronan had been spending all his time. He was not just living there, he was working from there. He had used his old, forgotten key to let the thieves into our house. While the cyber team dug deeper, the second attack, the quieter one, was already underway. Jude brought me the file for the Glass Bay Eco District project, the one that was now, suddenly, my entire world. Pinnacle Urban Design submitted their preliminary packet, he said. He laid it on my desk. It just became public. I don't have time for their marketing. Jude, I started. Look at page 12, he said, his voice flat. Stormwater mitigation. I opened the file. It was a beautiful, glossy 3D rendering. It was also, unmistakably, my design. Not the exact one. The angles were different. The materials rebranded. But the core concept, the proprietary, multi-stage filtration system I had developed based on the Breakwater Park tests, it was all there. It was my work. Stolen, watered down, but mine. The trash chute plans had been a test. The vault plans had been the real theft. And this was the product. This was where Ronan's theft was being sold. I stared at the two files, the Ledger article, full of Ronan's rage, and the Pinnacle bid, full of my work. They were not two separate problems. They were a pincer movement. He's not just trying to destroy us, I said, a slow, cold rage building. He's funding them. I held the press conference the next day. The room was packed. Local news, industry journals, even a stringer from the Wall Street Journal. They smelled blood. I did not give them blood. I gave them receipts. I stood at the podium, in front of a massive screen. Good morning. My name is Noel Archer. My uncle, Gareth Archer, built this company on two principles: honest work and clean books. Yesterday, our reputation was attacked. Today, I'm going to show you our timesheet. For the next hour, I did not defend. I taught. I put our complete, unredacted financials for the last 5 years up on the screen. Every project, every margin, every payroll check. I showed them the social housing project, the razor-thin margin Ronan had complained about. This, I said, pointing to the line item Ronan's stolen email had referenced, is the payroll guarantee. It is not rating funds. It is a promise. It is the policy that allowed us to finish that project on time, during a supply chain crisis, because our crews knew they would be paid. That is not financial misconduct. That is how Tide Point does business. I invited the state auditor's office, who was already in the room at my request, to begin a full, public audit that afternoon. I invited any journalist present to sit with our CFO and go through any invoice they wished. I finished by looking directly into the main camera. Our books are clean, our work is solid, and we are not going anywhere. We are building the future of this bay. Thank you. It was a victory. The narrative shifted. Our partners stopped, pausing. The stock stabilized. But I had shown my hand, and I had underestimated the fury of a man who had been denied his birthright. That night, I was driving home. The press conference had taken everything out of me. I was exhausted, my ribs aching from the tension. I had taken the truck, my old, reliable pickup. The road to Port Howland is a dark, winding pass, carved into the cliffside, with the ocean on one side and a rock face on the other. It was late, past 11, and a light mist was making the asphalt slick. I saw the headlights in my rearview mirror long before they were a problem. A black, heavy sedan, the kind with tinted windows, the kind Ronan's new friends all drove. It was coming up fast. Too fast. I tapped my brakes, expecting it to fly by. It did not. It stayed right on my bumper, its high beams filling my cab, blinding me. My heart, which had been steady all day, began to pound. I sped up. It sped up. I slowed down. It slowed down, staying glued to me. This was not impatience. This was a message. I rounded the last, tight curve before the straightaway. The sedan pulled out, as if to pass. I held my breath. gripping the wheel. It did not pass. It swerved. It swerved directly into my lane, aiming for my driver's side door. I yanked the wheel. It was a reflex, born of Gareth's lessons on icy roads. Don't brake. Steer. I turned toward the rock face, away from the 1,000-foot drop to the ocean. The sedan's fender grazed my truck with a high-pitched, metallic shriek. I lost control. My truck spun, the tires screaming. I saw the ocean, then the rock face, then the ocean again. I hit the guardrail. The sound was a deafening explosion of metal. My world became a violent, crumpling, shattering mess. My head hit the side window. My chest slammed into the steering wheel, which snapped under the force. The airbag deployed a second too late, a violent punch in the face, and then silence, except for the hiss of the radiator and the sound of the ocean. Far below, the black sedan was gone. I tasted blood. My left arm was numb, but my chest was on fire. A sharp, white-hot, singular pain that bloomed with every attempt I made to breathe. I looked down. The steering column was crushed. My rib was broken. I knew it. Don't build hollow structures. I unbuckled my seatbelt. The pain so intense it made me black out for a second. I fell against the door, and I laughed. A short, gurgling sound. "You missed," I whispered to the empty road. The police found the sedan an hour later, abandoned in an industrial park. Its front fender crumpled and streaked with Tide Point blue. It was registered to a shell corporation that, 2 days later, the cyber team linked to a holding company owned by the same group of Rivergate venture capitalists that Ronan Archer listed as his new investment partners. I was in the hospital for 3 days. The doctors used the words lucky and fractured rib. I just felt angry. While I was staring at the acoustic tile ceiling, Jude stepped up. He became the fortress. He put the entire company on level 2 security. He changed every code. He hired a private, 24-hour security team for the yard. He coordinated with the cyber team. He met with the police. He reassured the partners. The company did not miss a beat. The work continued. Gareth's systems, and the people he trusted, were holding. The structure was sound. On the 3rd day, the police came to my room. "We've arrested him," the detective said, his face weary. "Ronan Archer. We have enough to link his known associates in that vehicle. We're charging him with aggravated assault, conspiracy, reckless endangerment. He's not getting out this time." I felt a wave of nothing. Not relief, not victory, just a deep, profound exhaustion. It lasted 4 hours. Jude came in, his face tighter than I had ever seen it. "He's out," Jude said. "What? How?" "They said—" "Bail was set at $500,000, Jude said, reading from his tablet. "He paid it, in full, an hour ago, a wire transfer from an investment account. His new friends, his partners. He was more valuable to them out here, working, than he was sitting in a cell." I threw the plastic water cup against the wall. It was a childish, useless gesture. "It's not fair," I whispered, and the words tasted like they were 13 years old. "No," Jude said. "It's not. It's just business. Which brings me to this." He handed me the tablet. "This came across the wire while you were unavailable, a required SEC filing, an update to a major competitor's corporate structure." I took the tablet, my ribs screaming in protest. The file loaded. It was a standard, dry, legal document. Notice of new minority shareholder acquisition, Pinnacle Urban Design. My eyes scanned the text, looking for the name of the Rivergate Fund. I was expecting to see the connection, but the names were not corporate. They were personal, acquiring a 5% minority stake each. Victor Mercer, Elaine Mercer. My breath stopped. The pain in my ribs was gone, replaced by an absolute, suffocating cold. The cold of the trailer, the cold of the note on the refrigerator. They were not just on the bidders list. They were on the inside. Pinnacle, Ronan, Rivergate, my parents. This was not a pincer movement. This was a circle. They were all connected. The money that bailed Ronan out was the same money that was funding Pinnacle, the same money that had bought my parents a seat at the table. The fight for the Glass Bay Eco District was not a new war. It was the end of an old one. It was the bill for the note on the refrigerator, finally coming due, and this time, it was not a broken, hungry child they were facing. It was me.